You must have heard about the JavaScript object notation, or JSON for short, which is a very popular form of representing data as a string, especially for cases when you want to send the data from the server to the browser, back and forth. So just like data can be represented as XML, it may also be represented as JSON. In this lecture, we will see how the JSON format makes it easier to read data if you are using JavaScript. Well, JSON data in the string format is written very similar to the way objects in JavaScript are written. Alright, so let's write the book data as a JSON string and store it in a variable named book as string. Because this is a string, we will put it within single quotes. And we will not use double quotes here because inside the string we need to use double quotes. You will see what I mean, just bear a little. By the way, there is a website jasonlint.com which provides us with a way to validate our JSON strings. I use it all the time to validate the JSON before using it in my program, just to ensure that I have the correct JSON data to avoid errors later. So let's type in our JSON here on JSONlint. So it's an object, so we need to put the properties within open and close braces. Now each property inside a JSON object must be put within double quotes, alright? And the reason is that JSON is not really a JavaScript object. It is like a JavaScript object. You may think of JSON more as a string, just like XML, which is another data format. It's just that we write the JSON string in such a way that it resembles a JavaScript object. And there is a good reason to do that, alright? Another point is that in the JSON format, single quotes are not allowed for object properties, alright? Although they are strings, but we can only use double quotes. Let me add the title property first. Then after the colon, value of the property is a tale of two cities, alright? And let's validate. And this is a valid JSON string. Now if we use a single quote for these strings and try to validate the JSON, it will give an error. So when writing a JSON string, always use double quotes for strings. Let's add another property, author. Now let's validate this JSON string again. And of course it's a valid JSON. Let's add price of the book, which is a number. So the value, which is numeric, need not be written as a string. That is, JSON allows numeric values to be written directly, like shown here. But again, each property name must be quoted with double quotes. Of course, there are more details to the JSON format, which we will not cover in this tutorial, but you will get enough familiarity once you understand JavaScript objects. The beauty of representing your data in this format is this. Let's first store it in a JavaScript variable as a string, alright? And because the string itself contains double quotes, let's put this whole string within single quotes. Otherwise, we will need to escape the double quotes within the string. Alright. So now this variable book as a string contains a string in the JSON format. So can we access the properties within this string directly? That is, can we say book as a string dot title? Well, no, that's not defined, right? Because this variable contains just a string. But the beauty of this thing is that we can say where book is equal to json.parse and pass this function the JSON string. So json.parse method takes a JSON string and returns a JavaScript object. Alright, and now let's see what this JavaScript object is. Well, it's the same book object, similar to what we created in the string. So in one single step, we can convert this string data to a JavaScript object, which is very useful. Now you can access the properties of this object as a regular JavaScript object. If you have worked with XML data in Java, you may know that parsing XML data to create Java objects is a big enough deal. You have to marshal and unmarshal from one form to another using some framework, maybe making use of XSDs or whatever. But here it's so simple and straightforward, which also makes it elegant. And this is the reason why JSON has become so popular, because in most web applications, we get the data from the server, parse it in JavaScript, if you were doing it the Ajax way, and then manipulate your DOM tree in the browser. So if the data is in the JSON format, things become much simpler. In many programming languages which have support for dictionaries, it may be quite easy to spit out a JSON response from your web server in a statement or two. Alright? So that makes life easy for us. Similarly, from a JavaScript object, we can generate JSON string. But we will look at that in another lecture.